In this video, I'll be revealing why having $1.5 million does not promise the retirement security that many people think that it does, and why many retirees with this number still end up retiring poor. Over the years, I've worked with several clients who accumulated substantial savings but ended up struggling with retirement income. Through working with these clients, I discovered that wealth without strategy often leads to poor retirement outcomes regardless of portfolio size. And that's exactly why I'm making this video today, to show you why $1.5 million can still result in retirement poverty and the strategic framework that transforms wealth into reliable retirement income. So let me start by showing you the thinking trap that can lead wealthy retirees into this kind of a situation. I met a friend for breakfast last weekend, and he mentioned a conversation that he'd had with one of his colleagues. They were talking about their number. You know, the number that you want to accumulate in order to retire. And look, I think that's great. Having a goal during your accumulation years absolutely helps you stay focused and do the things that you need to do in order to save for retirement. But as good as it feels, hitting that number doesn't necessarily translate into retirement income success. It can create a false sense of confidence if you don't have a plan for how to take that money out after you retire. While you're working to hit that number, it's critical to think about how much you can take out every year, any foreseeable one-time expenses that can impact your account balances, and the taxes that you'll have to pay on all of these withdrawals. There's a mental shift that you'll need to make a few years before you retire, or at the very least, when you retire. If you stay stuck in accumulation thinking, a couple of things can happen. You either get overconfident and start taking too much out, or you focus on your account balances so much that you become afraid of them going down, yet don't take anything out and you miss out on enjoying those first few years of retirement. Now, this second scenario is maybe the subject of another video. In this case, you may end up retiring poor from an experiential standpoint. But the first scenario is clearly one where reaching that big savings number creates a sense of overconfidence. And this is the thinking trap that can plague retirees who have substantial savings more so than retirees who have less but plan carefully. But what does this actually look like for our overconfident savers? While they all share one thing in common, poor planning or no planning, there are a few different flavors of this that I'd like to show you. But first, I need some M&Ms. Okay, so here I have two glasses. The first is our retiree who has planned out his retirement income. He's using the guardrails framework for sustainable portfolio withdrawals. So his plan is to take out a fixed percentage each year, but on a monthly basis. So let's move 12 M&Ms from his portfolio into his savings account. Since these withdrawals are from his IRA, he's withheld taxes, so there won't be any surprises when April 15th rolls around. Now, this guy isn't living on the austerity plan, but he's thought through all of the cash flows that they'll need, especially over the first few years of retirement. So they're traveling and enjoying life, but it's in the budget. Now, our second retiree does not have a retirement income distribution plan. He hasn't calculated how much that he can sustainably spend every year, but he has a decent-sized balance in his IRA, so he's feeling pretty confident. When he retires, he motors along with his normal spending patterns and eventually needs to replenish his cash accounts sometime mid-year. So let's move 12 M&Ms from his portfolio into his cash accounts. But he and his special lady want to travel. So they book that Mac Daddy no-holds-barred trip to the Amalfi Coast. So let's take out another 3 M&Ms from the portfolio for that. And later in the year, they decided to go ahead and replace one of the cars. That'll be 2 M&Ms. So instead of withdrawing 12 M&Ms like the first guy, our second retiree has now withdrawn 17 M&Ms. But unfortunately, he's not done. Once tax time rolls around, our second guy is in for a rude awakening. All of these M&Ms were taxable withdrawals from his IRA. So now he owes Uncle Sam another 3 M&Ms for the tax bill. That brings his total up to 20. And don't forget, those 3 M&Ms that he used to pay taxes are taxable income for next year. So this is the retirement income planning trap. If they both retire with $1.5 million, retiree number 2's initial withdrawal rate comes in at 7.5%. Now that 1 year isn't going to ruin him, but it's much higher than what was sustainable. After a few years withdrawing like this and throw in an inevitable down year in the market, Before you know it, this guy's $1.5 million has dropped into the six-figure range. Another flavor of withdrawal strategy mistake is improper sequencing. If you have multiple accounts with different tax treatments, such as brokerage accounts, tax-deferred accounts, and tax-free Roth accounts, where you withdraw from matters. For many people, it makes the most sense to withdraw from taxable accounts first, tax-deferred accounts next, and save tax-free Roth accounts for last. But of course, be sure to confirm this in your financial plan. So to give you an idea, here's an example from a financial plan that's a little touch and go. They shouldn't panic, but they certainly need to be mindful of what they're doing. If they get the right withdrawal sequence, their Monte Carlo odds of not having to adjust their lifestyle come in at 68%. But if instead they take all of their distributions from their accounts pro rata, that number drops to 65%. And it also leaves a little less to the kids if that's something that matters to them. When you get this sequence wrong, it actually reduces what's available for you to use from your portfolio over the course of your retirement. And if you're going to work so hard to hit your number before you retire, the idea is to get as much from that as possible, right? A third flavor of withdrawal strategy mistake is the emotional withdrawal. And this isn't necessarily limited to withdrawals during times of market volatility to move to safety, although that's a common one. No, this could also look like taking money out to invest in a risky, sure thing that doesn't play out like you think. No matter which one it is, you could either lock in your losses during a down market or strike out trying to hit a home run. And if these withdrawals are from tax-deferred accounts, there's going to be a tax bill associated with it. Now look, I want to put some perspective on this. We aren't looking for perfect in our financial lives. A mistake here or there won't necessarily ruin your retirement. But we do want to minimize these kinds of mistakes so they don't compound and take you out. But while a poor withdrawal strategy can decimate even a large portfolio, it can amplify Social Security timing mistakes for wealthy retirees, potentially costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, everyone has their own take on when to time your Social Security. If you're in a very strong financial position, then this is one of those decisions that might only marginally affect your overall plan. But if you start out with $1.5 million and find yourself in one of these scenarios that I've just described a minute ago, maximizing your Social Security can take a lot of the pressure off. And if you don't do it right, well, it could make things worse. Around 30% of American retirees apply for Social Security in the first year that it's available to them at age 62. Because they apply early, their benefits will be reduced. After all, they'll be getting payments for 5 years before their full retirement age. So it's only fair that they'll be paid a little less. And of course, the flip side is true. If you wait until after your full retirement age to apply, then your monthly benefits will increase. As it turns out, around 23% of Americans apply for Social Security after their full retirement age. But does it matter? And if so, when does it matter? If you're in one of these scenarios where you may have taken out a little too much money early on in retirement, then maximizing your Social Security can have a positive impact. If you delay benefits, the age where you break even tends to fall somewhere in your 80s depending on your circumstances. But all else being equal, the annual cost of inflation adjustment, in my opinion, makes delaying a little bit more attractive. And if you're healthy and have a family history of longevity, then the difference can be hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're lucky enough to live that long. But we have to address the bridge between your retirement and your application date should you choose to delay. This only increases the pressure on your portfolio to bridge that gap. And this is your argument for applying early. I wish I could tell you that there was a definitive right answer here, but there isn't. But I will say that the less that you've planned for your retirement income, the more important your Social Security application strategy becomes. Now that you understand the Social Security optimization importance, if you're wondering how to maximize your retirement income regardless of your savings amount, click on the link below to book a call and I'll analyze your specific situation to optimize your retirement strategy. So our retiree with $1.5 million and no distribution plan might not help things with his Social Security decision. But there are two more issues that could potentially make things even worse. Let me show you the next one. Our second retiree is already playing catch up with no withdrawal plan and maybe a suboptimal decision on Social Security. But there's a ticking time bomb that could potentially deplete his portfolio even faster. We all expect that healthcare expenses across our lives will likely be uneven. Between retirement and Medicare, you can expect to pay a little bit more for health insurance premiums and out-of-pocket expenses. Once you turn 65 and are eligible for Medicare, we expect those expenses to drop. And finally, as we age, we expect our medical expenses to increase, including the need to possibly pay for in-home care, assisted living, or even nursing home care. So earlier we talked about the need for your investments to help you bridge that gap between retirement and when your Social Security starts. Unfortunately, your investments will also have to support these expenses during the gap between your retirement, when your health insurance ends, and when you turn 65 and are eligible for Medicare. This puts additional stress on your investments. And if this isn't something that you've planned for, well, you may need to take out bigger M&Ms to cover the gap. Right now, it's not unreasonable to expect healthcare inflation to be double that of general inflation. So as we plan for healthcare expenses, we aren't talking trivial increases here. But these aren't even the most expensive part. It's those later in life healthcare expenses that really start to add up. Right now in the US, here are the average annual costs for long-term care expenses. $70,800 for assisted living, $75,500 per year for in-home care, and $127,750 for nursing home care. If our retiree who hasn't planned for these expenses has depleted his savings by the time that he and his wife need these kinds of care, he potentially has a problem. Each of them may need some combination of one of these kinds of long-term care for 2 or 3 years each. Of course, they may have equity in their home that could potentially cover some, if not all, of these expenses, but it would be better to plan for it. Now, I'll state a couple of caveats here. If you're in your early 60s, there's still a good chance that the future will not continue in a linear fashion between now and when you may run into these types of long-term care expenses. We always need to keep in mind that we will have upside surprises along the way. And if you want to insure against some of these expenses, that's no picnic either. Last I checked, there are only a couple of insurance companies that are still writing traditional long-term care insurance policies, and the premiums are eye-watering. There are options that combine a universal life insurance policy with a long-term care rider that have become popular recently, but they're complicated insurance products that require plenty of due diligence before you purchase one. Either way, these long-term healthcare expenses keep me up at night. There's no easy way to plan for them with a great deal of certainty, even for retirees who start out with significant savings. So while healthcare costs create a ton of uncertainty for our retirement, there's one more factor that can further complicate this for retirees with lots of investments, but no real distribution plan. So our retiree who started out with no income plan has come out of the gates hot with his distributions, has not optimized for Social Security, and still has to worry about the ticking time bomb of long-term healthcare expenses. But unfortunately, there's one more thing that could trip him up, even though he started retirement with $1.5 million. If he has most of his savings in his IRA, that means that whenever he makes a withdrawal, that amount is subject to ordinary income taxes. And since we have a progressive tax rate, the more you take out, the higher the tax bill will be. But Uncle Sam isn't just going to let us keep all of our money in these tax-deferred accounts indefinitely. Oh no, that's why there are required minimum distributions, or RMDs. Once you turn 75, you're required to take a certain amount out of your tax-deferred accounts. And the amount that you're required to take out depends on your life expectancy. The older you get, the more you're required to take out. If your tax-deferred accounts continue to grow between retirement and age 75, the larger your RMDs will be, and the more taxes you'll have to pay. So in the case of our retiree who hasn't planned for this, these distributions that he's forced to make at age 75 and beyond will end up costing him more in taxes and putting further stress on his portfolio to cover his living expenses. So here's an example of how a couple's tax rate will increase over the course of their retirement after starting out relatively low. You can see where the blue graph jumps at age 75 when they start their RMDs. Notice how it even comes close to breaking through the yellow line, which represents the 22% tax bracket. So what can we do about this? You don't want to not pay the IRS, I can assure you that. This is where it makes sense to start thinking about strategic Roth IRA conversions during retirement. In those first few years between retirement and age 75 when RMDs start, There's an opportunity each year to take a portion of your IRA, convert that portion into a Roth IRA, and pay the taxes on the amount that you've converted. It doesn't sound like a lot of fun to pay taxes that you don't have to pay each year, especially since you're now living off your investments. But by playing chess and not checkers with our taxes, we do have the opportunity to lower our lifetime tax bill. And as you can see in this graph, the green shaded area, which are the taxes that this retiree pays, they're higher in the early years than the blue shaded area we saw earlier. But later in life, once RMDs have started, they're paying much less than they would have had they done no tax planning along the way. Not only does this end up saving them hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes over their lifetime, many of those assets are now in tax-free Roth accounts. Now, this strategy isn't for everyone. If a large portion of your retirement savings are in tax-deferred accounts like IRAs, 401ks, or 403bs, then it's something that you want to have on your radar. And I would recommend enlisting the help of a professional team, such as a financial planner and a CPA working together to calculate the amount to convert each year. It really is a year-by-year process to work through all of this in the fall, since conversions have to happen before year end. But if it's right for you, it could potentially save you a ton in taxes over your retirement. Now that you understand RMD tax consequences, let's look at how to transform $1.5 million into reliable retirement income. So you can see how poor retirement income planning, combined with the wrong Social Security strategy, underestimating retirement healthcare expenses, and having no plan for RMDs, can cause anyone to struggle in retirement. How do we avoid this? The first place to start is understanding what kind of sustainable income is available to you based on what you have. Using something like the guardrail strategy for sustainable portfolio withdrawals, combined with your Social Security and pension income, is a great place to start. If that amount will easily cover your retirement living expenses, you're in a good place. But that's just the start. I think it's important to account for as many irregular retirement expenses as you can. This is where you'd bring in some sort of financial planning software to model healthcare between retirement and Medicare, as well as penciling in long-term healthcare expenses. I'd also account for discretionary items like vacations, replacing the car, home repairs, or eventually downsizing. And at that point, you'll probably have a pretty robust plan. At this point, you can figure out what kind of investment return it would take to make your plan feasible. This will help you choose an asset allocation and start figuring out which accounts need to house each type of investment to get the biggest tax benefit. And finally, now it's time to review some of those tactical items, such as timing your Social Security benefits and whether or not it makes sense to include strategic Roth IRA conversions. If you follow this process, you can decide if you need to retire as planned, to make some adjustments, or to keep working for a couple of more years. And don't overlook the benefit of working with a team of professionals. A financial planner and a CPA who are on your side working together will make this process much easier. I'm fully confident that many of you can do all of this on your own. But the question is this how you want to spend your time in retirement? Now that you understand why people with $1.5 million still retire poor and the strategic framework that transforms wealth into reliable retirement income, you can avoid the mistakes that create retirement poverty despite substantial savings. If you want help turning your retirement savings into reliable inflation-adjusted income and avoiding the strategic mistakes that could cause you to burn through your savings too early, then click on the link below to book a call, and I'll analyze your situation to create your comprehensive retirement income strategy. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.